What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in. My name is Ryan Morrissey, and I'm here at Peak Custom Fitness Solutions to talk to you about Sober October. So as many of you know that work out here, we are not into short-term, quick diets or 30-day cold turkey plans or jumping into a fitness routine that's only meant to have a short-term, goal or success in mind. We're a big fan of providing education and insight, long-term strategies, long-term goal setting to really help people change their lives and get on a journey that lasts, a long time or the rest of your life instead of just something focused on short-term. So we're going to do the same thing this month. We're going to be sharing information related to alcohol use. So this is going to come in the form of statistics related to health. We're going to talk about marketing in the industry and how it's meant to basically fool all of us. We're going to talk about alcohol keeping us from making the fitness gains that we could if we didn't have it in our life. And then decision making. How does our psychology change based upon alcohol use and temptation? So rather than me sitting here and reciting a bunch of facts, I'm bringing on one of my good clients, long-term client of mine, Maureen Benkovich. She's been huge in the fitness industry over the past few decades. She's been a Pilates instructor and a fitness instructor herself. And just diehard exercise enthusiast. Maureen just finished 1 year of sobriety after realizing that alcohol was influencing her in a negative manner. So I have Maureen on for a podcast where the two of us go back and forth about all those different areas that I just mentioned. We're going to talk about the industry. We're going to talk about some new research that just came out that's really targeted not to just the heavy drinker and health effects, but the low to moderate drinker that's all too common in our country. So Maureen's going to share a bunch of information about her journey over the last year, and she's going to answer a bunch of questions that we might have about our use and whether our use of alcohol is safe, is getting in the way of some things we're doing, and really affecting decision making that we're doing along the way. So I hope you welcome Maureen. Hope you guys get some information out of this that can help you or maybe a friend or loved one, and we appreciate you tuning in. So I want to start with a big congrats. So it's been 1 year on your journey, and it's been amazing to follow along, and thanks for kind of keeping me by your side in the fitness industry and fitness setting. It's been incredible to watch. And this month, October coming up, is a big month for alcohol awareness, right? Yes. So in the industry, we hear Sober October all the time, and we've been discussing this and bringing awareness to our clients. You've been sharing information that you've been learning along the way. Your change in behavior and like the psychology of this whole process has been fascinating, and I've learned a ton. So our goal is to share some of this information with our clients, our people that we work out with, our teammates in races, to just share all the invaluable information that you've learned over the year. So I want to start with a congrats, because your celebration this year was probably a little different than celebrating things in the past too, right?
Yes.
I think a 5:30 a.m. class out in the dark with a headlamp on doing push-ups and running was a little different than the way you'd celebrate things in the past. So congrats, it's been an awesome journey. So who better to share this information than somebody that's currently living the change, right? And you've been a year out, and I know that recently we've discussed your change in kind of perception of where you are in your journey now, and in the last month or two, you've kind of come to a different place than you were, when you were in your first month or two, when things were a little rocky and there's a lot more stress at that time. So I'd love our clients to hear, your journey as detailed as you want to get into. But what started the journey? Like, if we can start there, what brought you to the place where, I know a lot of times people think that you have to have a really serious problem in order to address alcohol, and that's different for everyone. So can you share what brought you to make change?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share my journey, but I also have to thank you personally, because you've been a big part of it.
I appreciate that.
I know when I came in here and told you I am giving up alcohol, and this was a huge part of my journey. Coming in here, showing up, working out, and having your support has been huge.
Well,
so
thank you.
Just have to thank you.
It's been an honor to stand by your side and watch you, and to see the person that you were on the side of it. Not that you were a different person, but your kind of awareness and behaviors were so different to what they are now. It's been awesome. It's so cool to watch. So
Yeah.
congrats.
You know, I started questioning my drinking a long time ago, which is not uncommon that people start to become aware, and that's really where it starts with is awareness. Sometimes we're asleep and we're not aware, and we're just rolling through life and we're doing what everybody else is doing, and it looks normal and it's accepted by society. But then I started to become aware that this was not good for me, that it was no longer serving me, and it was actually causing me a lot of stress and anxiety and affecting me negatively. And I'm a person who is highly driven, like to take care of myself. I've been a health and fitness instructor, I've been a Pilates instructor, I've had my own personal training business, I've done fitness competitions. I'm constantly researching how to eat better. I work with someone like you to keep me accountable, to keep me on track. And yet I was doing this other behavior over here that I wanted to keep over here and pretend that it wasn't affecting all the other areas of my life. But eventually that just became too obvious to me that this was a problem for me. If you met me or knew me on the outside, you'd say, boy, Maureen likes to have fun on the weekends. And she's a really healthy person. But inside, I had this whole internal struggle going on. It's called cognitive dissonance, I've learned. But it's just, you're at war with yourself. Because you know, deep in your heart and in your brain, that you're doing something that is really not good for you. And for me, that became intolerable. So I started going through the process of Googling things and looking into alcohol quizzes. And, you know, there's also another interesting thing called confirmation bias, where you can find the answers you're looking for. Because I was looking for the answers that, oh, you know, it's okay, you're not drinking too much, you're fine. And you can find those all the time on the internet. But as I said, inside I knew it wasn't in alignment with my values. I guess that was like the biggest thing. So it's...
We had spoken, sorry to interrupt.
No.
I've known you for, it's been probably, 11, 12 years, right, that I've been training you. So we've spoken about this from a health and fitness and body composition perspective. Right, and it was the elephant in the room, and you were hesitant or resistant to change, as are most people.
Definitely.
Right? We knew that it was like the last box to be checked, because you're dialed in with your nutrition, you know, worked out hard, worked out consistent. But this time it was more than just a body composition goal or a health goal, right? This was affecting you from a behavior or a stress management or a social, all those things tied in together, right? It had kind of come to the surface in more areas than just, I need to get this extra 10% of my fitness.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was just really a surface, you know, objection that I had. And I would know that, and I would think, okay, well, I'll do a 7 to 10 day fast from alcohol and eat really healthy, and then go right back to my lifestyle, and thinking that was enough, you know. But it was really the anxiety level that I was experiencing. I would wake up at 3 in the morning after drinking too much, and be ramped up. My heart would be beating, and I would think, oh no, I did it again. I drank too much alcohol. I said I wasn't going to, and I drank too much alcohol. And I couldn't get back to sleep for a while, and eventually I'd get back to a very disturbed sleep. So I'd wake up the next day exhausted and determined that I was not going to drink. Make all these vows to myself, you know, take detoxing milk thistle, try to do cardio and sweat it out. And maybe, you know, this would be a Monday, and no, I wouldn't drink, and I wouldn't drink for days, and then Thursday would roll around, and all that anxiety is sort of worn off, and I'd do it again. And so it was a cycle that would just continue. And I've come to call it the detox-retox cycle. I got that name actually from another woman I follow. She's called Sober Sis, and she started a Sober Curious movement a long time ago. And she talks about the detox-retox cycle. But I was definitely in that constantly.
Sober Curious, that's great. I love that term. You explain a little more about like the viewpoint of sober curious versus most people think this is just black and white, right?
Yeah.
You either drink or you don't.
Yeah. So Sober Curious kind of started actually in Europe, in London, I believe, if I'm correct, where people just started getting curious because there's so much drinking in London too, in Europe, all over the place. And the level of alcohol use disorder is so high, as in the United States. But there was a movement called Sober Curiosity, where people started questioning, like, why is it that I can't stop drinking when I want to? I really desire to, but I just can't seem to do it on my own. And I started looking into that online. And there's a whole bunch of quit lit, that's another term I learned, quit literature out there. Incredible amounts of people's stories and what they went through and what helped them to quit. So I became sober curious. I wanted to know more about, as I do with most things when I'm trying to figure them out, I want to understand, why can't I just stop?
Yeah.
Why do I make these promises to myself and I break them? So instead of being stuck in, shaming and blaming and beating myself up, I moved out of that into, I want to understand, why can't I stop?
That's huge, the why, right? So you went on a deeper level to figure that out.
Yeah.
And what was the resource? Can you tell people a little more about what's been so empowering, right? And seems like an educational experience, not just support, right? It's kind of a twofold or even more complex than that program. And it's been pretty cool to learn from you, and I've learned a ton along the way. And that's why I'm now so curious about all the different pieces of this, from the marketing and the industry to the psychology and the behavior,
It's fascinating.
the social setting. It is, yeah. So can you share a little bit about that program and how that's maybe an alternative to what we think of as normal assistance in becoming sober?
Well, and that's a big reason people don't want to get curious, because they only know one methodology right now, if they're a person who wants to either moderate or look at their drinking or stop drinking. And that holds a lot of people back from pursuing and understanding more about alcohol and drinking alcohol, because they don't want to go to AA. And I have to state that AA has been wonderful for millions of people. But for me, I knew it wasn't an option because I didn't fit that model, and I couldn't claim that I was powerless over alcohol. I knew there had to be a way. So as I said, I started Googling things all about alcohol, trying to understand, and this book popped up a number of times called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. And, what a catchy title. So I looked into that, and she had something called the 30-day alcohol experiment that anybody can do online. It's available now. You just Google that, and you can go in there and start your own alcohol experiment. And that's the whole point. It's to learn. It's an experiment. It's not something you are meant to white knuckle through and get to the end of 30 days. It's to learn along the way. So I did the alcohol experiment, and there's little bits of information that you get every day and video content helping you to understand about alcohol, that it's an addictive substance. And we are drinking an addictive, toxic substance. And we wonder why we can't just stop. That it's so much more than willpower. And then what you just said is, to understand the science of addiction, of alcohol, of our brain, what our brain does to protect our body when we ingest a toxin, and all these things that get set into motion. The more I understood, the more I'm like, no wonder why I can't just stop on my own. And I needed that community and that support, and for me, the education and the science and the understanding that eventually got me to the place where I was ready to let go of alcohol.
Well, we know if we compare this to other areas of health or any behavior, really, that's why I'm so intrigued by this program, why it's been fascinating to watch you along the way, and what lines up with what we do here and how we do things at Peak is that I'm a big believer in empowering behaviors through education. So if you don't understand why you need to change your nutrition strategy, right, and the physiological effect in your body, then it's hard to make the decisions, right? And we wind up going to plans like an end date that ends it, like a cold turkey, I'm going to give up sugar, right? And I'm going to do it for 30 days.
Right.
Well, then what happens at day 31, right? If we don't have enough information to make decisions when we're free of our meal plan that somebody wrote for us, how do we continue to integrate into a normal lifestyle. So this is in line with the same kind of process where we utilize this for education in fitness and in nutrition. And I think it's empowered you, and that was a word you just used a minute ago, versus made it about willpower to feel like, oh, I can't do this. Like I'm a failure. I'm continuing to fail here and I can't move forward. This is a big thing that's always going to be here, instead of, no, here are tools in your toolbox.
Yes.
Here's the education, right? Here's how this support and, group that's also learning at the same time, we're all going to move forward, in a rate where you're going to be able to make decisions on your own in the future, right? And handle this. It's been so cool to watch.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned toolbox, because that's what I've learned through Annie Grace and This Naked Mind are tools in my toolbox. And one of the biggest ones is like thoughts are things. So like the thought that I need to have alcohol, I need to have a drink tonight because I'm stressed out and I had a bad day and it's going to take the edge off. And learning to pause and say, is that true? Will it really change my stress? Is it really going to help me? Sure, in the short term, we know there's a chemical effect, dopamine hit, that happens from alcohol. Yes, that is true, but it wears off, and you keep trying to chase that initial hit with the following drinks.
Yeah.
But you wake up the next morning, and your stress is still there, and now you've got all these other chemicals in your body that your body has tried to, flood you with to take you back to homeostasis. So now you're even more stressed. And it may not be that apparent at first. You might be like slightly irritable, slightly tired, slightly less able to deal with your kids, and you snap at them. But these are these little symptoms that happen from drinking alcohol.
Yeah, that stuff's fascinating. And I think the more people know that, they understand why and how it's relatively easy to fall into that cycle. Right?
It's insidious.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about you. So on this end of the journey, what have you noticed with you physically, behaviorally, mental clarity, things like that? What has changed for you specifically? I know it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different depending on, what you're drinking, how long you're drinking, why you're drinking. For me, wow, I can think of so many things that have changed. I now get up at 5:30. I never thought I would do that.
Good
I
things
get
happen at
even
5:30,
earlier
right?
when I'm going to work out with Peak OCR group,
Yeah.
and we have to be there at 6, and I got to get up and get hydrated and get stretched and awake. I want to be there. I'm excited about being there. That is huge. My sleep quality. Amazing. I can't even believe I can sleep through the night. I don't have to take a sleep aid. I wake up and I'm early and I'm ready to go. That has been amazing. Because when you're drinking, that doesn't happen.
I mean, if you don't mind me sharing, over the last few years, a significant percentage of sessions you were either late for, right? And it wasn't always a direct effect from alcohol the night before, but it could have been just crappy sleep.
Yep.
And I'd get the text message before a session, hey, I'm running late. I only got 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I'm really dragging today. I haven't had one of those text messages for months and months and months. It's pretty cool to see. So your consistency in the exercise and fitness area and nutrition, right, has been there more than it's ever been there because you haven't had a deterrent. Right? And it hasn't been a forced plan. You're just not missing, right?
I don't feel I'm missing out at all. As a matter of fact, instead of FOMO, I feel JOMO. So that's called the joy of missing out. I don't miss out on, I am not missing hangovers. I am not missing poor sleep. I am not missing anxiety-induced or depression-induced, by alcohol. I just have a lot more joy. I know that's going to sound maybe a little corny, but I just feel a lot more joy in life and gratitude. I definitely am looking at things through a different lens.
Yeah. Now, I know that, let's say we go back a year, right? That year prior and 2 years prior, there was a lot of anxiety in our country at that time, right? It's been a crazy couple of years. But our conversations in training now are polar opposite of what they used to be, right? So the few years prior, it was either full gas on intensity training, or it was, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I don't feel good, whether it's physically or mentally, right?
Right.
And it was forcing it. Like, okay, I'm here, I know I need to exercise, but I really am not physically or mentally ready to do this today. And over the last, especially 6 months, and I think I've said this to you a number of times now, like you really do seem like a different person for the better in all areas, where conversations we have are intriguing about this stuff and understanding psychology and brain chemistry. And I know we're both two geeks on that stuff.
I like to geek out on it.
Yeah, but it's fascinating,
Yeah.
right? And we both like physiology and we both like to talk about that. But you have a smile on your face for the whole session because it's, hey, this is what I've learned this week. This is what I'm applying. This is what I'm aware about now in my day, my social circle, my productivity, whatever it is. It's almost like opening a gift every week, and you share that, and it's enlightening, and it's been totally different. So that's the biggest piece that I've noticed with you, outside of physical changes, right, is just you have a different face, right? The kind of mental glow that you have on you every day is so different than it was years prior.
You know what the difference is? I would be recovering from the effects of alcohol, and it could be days later from when I drank. But I would think if I could get in there and I get my workout in, well, then I've negated some of the toxic effects of alcohol. So I wasn't really showing up here to get the most out of the workout. I was like checking the box, thinking that will undo some of the bad I've done to my body.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I wasn't here as mentally and physically. Like now I walk in here and I'm grateful that I can work out, and I want to focus and get the most out of this, and learn from you and challenge my body and get better. It wasn't that way before.
No, you'd be breaking zero,
Yeah.
be net zero in the week,
Yeah.
right? And then we have discussions like, why am I not making improvement? Well,
So many.
we're just undoing what you're doing on the weekends, right? And it's so hard.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was frustrating for me too. But I knew at the time I couldn't push you too hard on it because it wasn't an area where you were ready for change either.
Right.
So yeah, it was like that awkwardness of like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, it's all about awareness. I mean, one of the taglines I've learned from Annie Grace's book is change can only happen on the other side of awareness. And awareness can only happen with curiosity. You have to be willing to take a look at yourself and willing to ask the hard questions. Why am I drinking? Why do I drink more than I want to? Why do I continue to do this behavior even though I know it's affecting me negatively? And if you can truthfully keep asking that question, why, you keep getting down to the layers. And I've learned so much about what happens, for instance, when you link alcohol to trauma. So as you know, you went through with me, both my parents were sick over a 5-year span. I was also in a career that I hated. And I was definitely ramping up drinking in response to those issues. And studies and science show that when you start linking drinking to trauma, the level of addiction increases. Now it's got a much stronger hold on you because your brain has learned that temporary stress relief does happen, but it creates a thirst for itself because you have to keep doing it. Because you're not really looking at the problem. You're not really learning how to deal with stress. I wasn't really grieving for my parents. I still had to do that later.
Oh man, you're just suppressing it.
Yes, you're just suppressing it and putting it off.
Wow. Yeah, so I think awareness is one of the biggest reasons that we want to have this talk, right? So we can spread more information than what people see on commercials, right, or on the internet, and get a little deeper. And, a lot of people get caught up in their day-to-day life, jobs, tasks, minutia, stuff going on in society, right? We get all jammed up on that. And we don't ever think a little deeper about asking the whys.
Right.
And you don't even put the pieces together, right? So I'm sure there are a ton of people out there, and even in our community, that maybe we're in the place that you were in a year ago, that are aware of an elephant in the room.
Right.
And there are probably just as many people that don't realize that their behaviors linked to alcohol are maybe not healthy from a physical perspective or from an emotional perspective, a behavioral perspective. So bringing some awareness to light is the key here for this month, and that's what we're going to do here, and that's what we're kicking off with our talk.
Yeah.
So let's dive into one of the words that's always associated with alcohol, and it's problem.
Yes.
Right? It's a word that everybody uses to define, oh, I need to change, right? This is a problem. And that's looked at in a much different way in our society than it is with whether it's either substances, nutrition, lifestyle, behaviors. You know, for example, if it was another drug that we look at in our society as more severe, right, with a more, I guess,
Right.
acute risk of death, like a heroin or something like that, we don't look at moderation as okay.
Right.
Right? We don't think of it as, oh, well,
Can't
as long
moderate.
as you're not using heroin every day,
Yeah.
you know, it's not a problem. I'm balancing, right? Or on the other end of the spectrum, if it's a nutritional behavior, we have, you know, blood markers or body composition testing or whatever we want to use to quantify what's healthy and what's unhealthy. But when it comes to nutrition behaviors, if you don't understand the behavior that you're doing and where it's going to get you to long term, which is a problem area, right? Where it could be linked to diabetes or heart disease or something else. If we address that early because we understand how that behavior is on a trajectory to that, that behavior is the problem before we get to the physical problems that are going to come to the surface later.
Right.
So with alcohol, we don't look at it that way, right?
No.
So, I mean, when people know now that you're living a sober life, what's the first thing they say to you?
Well, I've definitely put it out there. I recently put out a post on Facebook at a year, and really it was just authentic and honest, and I got a lot of variety of responses. It was a really heartfelt post because it had to do with my father. And I just go into this a little bit, before he passed, he had a stroke. But before he had the stroke, he was concerned about my drinking because he had seen it ramp up as my mother was sick, and I would come home to take care of them. And he would say, you know, just one, babe, just one. And then I would, you know, go out with my friends in my hometown after I took care of my parents and try to drink away my stress and my hurt and my sorrow. After he had the stroke, he had no more ability to be subtle. And right before he passed, actually, he was introducing all his children to a doctor. We were all in a room. We were going to tell him that he wasn't coming back from the stroke, that he had tried really hard, he had fought really hard, but he wasn't coming back. And when the doctor walked in, my father, even after the stroke, was just an amazing man. He took the time to introduce all of us to the doctor. And he started with my oldest sibling, and he said, this is my daughter, Meredy, she's an artist. This is my daughter, Donna, she's a biochemist. This is my son, Mark, he's a judge. And this is my daughter, Maureen, the drinker. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And nobody else really noticed because of the gravity of what we were sharing with my father. But man, did that stick with me. And I thought, wow, do I want to be known as that? Is that like what my life is amounting to? You know, that really stuck with me, and that was a big part of my questioning process. But I believe it was him, like one last-ditch effort, you know, trying to ask me to change. And I did. And so I posted this on Facebook. And I got an amazing amount of support from so many people. Beautiful post. Some people saying, hey, I stopped drinking too. Others, you know, how did you do that? And then a few even calls from my relatives saying, gee, I didn't know you had a problem.
Yeah.
And this is huge because this is what we've been taught, and it's ingrained in us, that unless you have a problem, unless you're that person in the gutter who has lost everything, you know, that is the only time you should look at drinking and view it as a problem. But really, there's this whole other group of people on this spectrum of alcohol use. It's called the alcohol use disorder spectrum, who are down here on this end of the spectrum. They're called gray area drinkers. And that's where I was. That's where many people are. That's where most people are. Because we've been so inundated by society and by marketing and by television shows since we were kids. It's, you know, we live in an alcohol saturated society because there's money behind it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's driven by the alcohol industry. Huge lobbying, huge money goes into that. And they want us all to stay in this asleep phase, not this awareness phase, that as long as we drink responsibly, which they've worked very hard to get that tagline put on bottles instead of the warnings like cigarettes. There was actually some attempts to do that, and the industry fought those attempts. One was in Canada. It was really interesting. But they don't want that. They want to have drink responsibly, so the onus is back on you.
Wow.
What's wrong with you that you can't drink an addictive substance responsibly?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's mind-blowing, right?
And so we buy that. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't
Yeah.
I'm a real loser.
Yeah.
You know? And you go down this whole mental shame and blame cycle on yourself, and you want to keep it to yourself because you're like,
Yeah.
well, I guess I'm weak, you know? But really,
Yeah.
your body is doing what it does
Yeah.
to a toxic substance, and you're becoming addicted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow.
then I think I went on a tangent
No,
there, but
it's
you know,
needed,
yeah.
right, to understand the problem, right, or how we're misusing that word problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, depending upon where you are on this spectrum, you may have a bunch of underlying problems, right, that could be physical that you don't know about, right, or you're trending in that direction. They could be hiding trauma,
Yep.
right, or dealing with something
Right.
that you're really not dealing with, you're suppressing or you're
Right.
putting off. What the one piece I'll kind of share as we were discussing this and you're on your journey, several months ago, you were talking to me about just the psychological kind of ties to stress relief, right, and kind of self-medicating. And that really resonated with me. And I didn't realize that I was doing that at all until you said it.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't like I'd go home and drink, an amount of alcohol that someone would look at and say, oh, we have a problem here.
Right.
But it was just passing the fridge in the garage on the way home, and it happened on the days that were the toughest. And not from an exercise perspective, I'm fine handling that stress, but work, lack of sleep, a couple days, it kind of builds and builds and builds, and you put out some fires and you're just drained, right?
Yeah.
And I walk by the fridge, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have a beer, or a couple beers. Like, what is that
Yep.
doing? And by you identifying that, it empowered me, with information to
Awareness.
say, yeah, so I had a ton of awareness. And I took it on as like a challenge, kind of do
That's
that in
what
some
you do.
areas. Yeah, so that's the way it worked for me. But like, wow, I'm not gonna let my stressful day make me make a decision that's gonna impact my health, right? Where maybe I'm not gonna deal with stress tomorrow because tomorrow might be worse. I might have more stress tomorrow. So why would I wanna go into that like tainted from today's choice? Or if I have to get up in the morning and work out, like why would I go into that at 80% of what I could be?
Depleted. Yeah.
Just to temporarily solve the stress problem, which really, if it's 5 o'clock, I've got to deal with the stressful problem at 9 o'clock. I got to get back on my laptop and deal with it. And I'm not going to deal with it if I have a few beers. So that was when I had my biggest awareness moment to the behavior associated with it,
Yeah, that's so cool that you made that connection. And, dopamine is such an interesting thing. I want to learn more about it. We were talking about it a little bit, but actually what they've learned is, so when you're in your truck driving home and you start thinking about having a beer and you think about opening the refrigerator, that dopamine response is already happening.
Wow.
Even
Yeah.
before you take that sip of alcohol, because you have built that neural pathway.
Yeah.
Your brain has learned, ooh, when we walk in the garage, we're gonna have this drink and I'm gonna feel better, and it already starts happening.
Wow. Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, the whole
Wow.
brain chemistry thing is
It really
crazy.
is.
And I think the other huge thing I learned, and Huberman, who we'll get into, Dr. Huberman talks about this, but your body, what it does, it's an amazing machine, and it immediately knows, we can fool ourselves through advertising and everybody else is doing it, and I'm just doing what everybody else is doing. But our body knows, the moment you drink it, it goes into this whole mode of what it has to do to get rid of this toxin. So when you have that dopamine hit, your body is always trying to bring you back to homeostasis, your brain.
Yeah.
So it releases its own storehouse of chemicals
Wow.
that we have within us.
Yeah.
And one of them is called dynorphin, and it's
Yeah.
not talked about a lot. It's
Yeah.
actually a peptide, but it is a natural depressant within
Oh,
our
wow.
brains, because you have artificially stimulated your brain and given it a dopamine hit. And your brain knows the difference between artificial dopamine hit and a real one. A real one is from exercise, right?
Yeah.
We do our cardio, we get the neurotransmitter boost, we get the dopamine hit,
Yeah.
we feel good.
Yeah.
Your brain knows that. It doesn't release any chemicals. You drink alcohol, your brain knows this is not from within me, right? This is external, this is artificial, and it immediately works to bring you back. So it releases dynorphin, which is a depressant. So, it's interesting on a chart, you have this dopamine hit and it goes up, and for about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on your size and your physiology and if you ate or not, then you start to come down. Well, your body's released that dynorphin, right, the depressant to bring you down, and you start to feel that subconsciously, and that's when you want another drink because you're trying to get that dopamine hit again.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I heard this from you, or maybe it was from Dr. Huberman, but when you're chasing that again, you get diminished returns, right? So the first drink, you're there, you feel great. And then you spend the rest of the night trying to get there again, but you're never going to get there again, right?
Yeah, and that's important because if you look at it on a graph, right? So you have your first dopamine hit, you're coming down, releases dynorphin, the depressant. You drink it again, you have a little bit of a hit, not as high, but your body releases that dynorphin again. So with every drink, you're getting this flooding of chemicals. And there's other ones happening too, adrenaline and cortisol too.
Yeah.
But talking specifically about the depressant. So that's why I would wake up at 3 in the morning when the actual alcohol was done being metabolized, but I'm left with all these chemicals in my body that my own body has flooded me with to try to deal with this toxin.
Wow.
So I have all this depressant in my body, and I've got adrenaline and cortisol, so I'm ramped up and stressed and anxious and depressed at the same time.
Yeah, not a good combo, right?
So all for that 20-minute relief of stress relief, I'm much worse off now
You're
than
paying
I
the
was.
price. Yeah. So I want to dive into some of the physiology behind this in a second. But before we do that, I think it's important, most people watching will probably think, oh, the physical byproducts of this behavior only affect people that are drinking 10 drinks a night, right? You're binge drinking on the weekend, or you're drinking 5 drinks every day all week, and we have some really serious chronic use. Do you want to kind of define, not to put everybody in a box, but like some examples of how people use alcohol that might, send them down this path of some negative effects physically that they don't realize because it's not shunned in society. It's totally accepted, supported.
It's supported, it's celebrated.
Yeah, rewarded, exactly. Yeah. You want to talk about it so people can kind of identify like, oh, I should listen up to the next part of this talk, right?
I thought it was really interesting because actually Andrew Huberman defines chronic. Because even when we hear the word chronic, we think it means someone who's drinking all the time, a lot, has a problem. Again, we use that word, but actually chronic means, over time, right? So you can be a person who has their wine every night, 1 or 2 glasses every night, so that's 7 days a week, maybe you're having it. Or you're the person like I was who would detox during the week, and then I would have most of my drinks on the weekend. They are the same person. It's the same thing.
It affects the same physically. Yeah. Chronic
does not mean you, are classified as an alcoholic at all.
So I'm going to put Dr. Andrew Huberman's podcast in the notes of this, so people can find the link if they want to listen to that podcast, which is about 2 hours, and it's full of all the latest research on, like you just said, chronic drinking, low to moderate use, not the heavy drinker. So it's new research that's just come out that he, has compiled and shared, and it's in a very digestible format for anybody to understand. But the way that he defines that, or the way that the research defined that, was 1 to 2 drinks per day, right? Or the equivalent. So whether they're all used on the weekend, right? Or they're spread out throughout the week, the physiological effects are from that category of drinker, right? Which a lot of our society, right, including myself at times, can fall into that, right?
Well, we've also bought into what we've heard is that moderate drinking is okay. And remember who's backing all those studies is the alcohol industry.
People that are making money.
That's right. It's always about the money in the bottom line.
Yeah.
So this is a monumental study, and it's being talked about everywhere in the sober curious community. So it's really impactful.
Yeah. So let's dive into some of that physiology. Okay. So obviously you've learned a ton along the way, and through the year, and statistics and numbers and all that we could talk about for hours. But I think there's some really big, impactful pieces to hit. And what was kind of empowering too, and understanding this stuff, and a deeper dive from Huberman, right, was that alcohol is a poison. It's a classified poison, right? It comes in 3 forms. One of them's digestible and consumable, but it's still a poison, right?
Ethanol.
Correct.
It's the same stuff when you go to the gas station and it says ethanol.
Isn't that
It's
crazy?
the same stuff we put in our car.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether it's from, hard liquor or beer or wine. None of that matters. The alcohol, that it's coming from needs to turn in to another substance in the body, right? So not to get super deep on the chemistry, but I think it's important for people to understand that acetaldehyde is what it's converted to, and then it has to be converted to acetate after. Acetate has a fuel value, right? So I remember learning this in college, like, oh, alcohol is actually energy. You get 7 calories per gram of alcohol. That's stuck in my head forever. Probably when I was playing beer pong, I'm like, all right, I got all this energy now. Oh my gosh. But the time that alcohol is in the acetaldehyde form is when the really serious effects, come from that. So the better equipped you are, right, of converting alcohol into acetate, you can kind of, I want to say minimize, but you can cut down the negative effects of alcohol. And then I'm not going to do a deep dive, but if people want, it's on that podcast, talking about the genetic predisposition to how you can tolerate and break down alcohol, right? And it doesn't mean that the physical effects aren't there. It just means that you can, quote unquote, handle it, right, by maybe processing it quicker and it doesn't knock you on your butt, or you can tolerate it and it changes your behavior for a positive way, where some people kind of shut down after they have a drink or two, they get tired, they don't feel good. That has nothing to do with the physical effect it has on the body in a detrimental way. And I thought that was kind of mind-blowing, right? So you can feel great, totally tolerate your drinks, have 5 beers and you're the life of the party and everything's good. But you're still doing the same damage that somebody that has 3 drinks feels horrible. It's equal. Right. I thought that was an important
Well, I
one.
think tolerance is an interesting thing too, because we think, oh, I can handle drinking this much, but actually developing a tolerance is really not a good thing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
It means your body is now consistently putting out those chemicals, the cortisol, the adrenaline, the dynorphin too, and you are increasing intolerance, and it's taking you more to get drunk, intoxicated, but you're still having all those physiological effects happening in your body, your liver, all the cells. He talks about how it goes right through the blood-brain barrier. It's water and fat soluble. I mean, it goes to every organ, every cell. That's unusual.
I totally agree. That was mind-blowing for me too. So usually negative effects from substances, whether it's food or a drug or something like that, has kind of like a down a path effect, right? But alcohol, like you just said, fat and water soluble, it can reach every cell. Crossing blood-brain barrier is why it's tied to so many degenerative neurological issues too. People usually just equate negative effects of alcohol with liver, because that's where we process it the best, right? Or the most efficient. But again, like you just said, it's hitting all parts of the body. It affects everything.
And you think about that with Alzheimer's and what's going
Dementia
on,
and
increasing
everything
it in
else.
dementia. I mean, just knowing that. And yet we are so in love with our alcohol that we will even push that off. But once we start to put all this information together, hopefully it helps people become more aware.
Yeah, exactly. The other big one, so if we look at it this way, the way I always try to look at it in what we do here in our industry is, what are the biggest, when we talk about health, what are the biggest causes of death, right? Heart, right? Neurodegenerative, diabetes, or we can call it metabolic disorder, right? Cancer. Those are all the big ones. So what can we do in those categories to decrease our risk, right? And improve longevity or improve lifespan, like quality of life, right? And we do all these things. We exercise consistently, like so many people in here, myself included, we split hairs over what kind of body part split should I do with my weight training, and what's my rest period, and don't heat up your meals in plastic in the microwave, because that's going to cause cancer. Don't do this, don't do that, don't get around cigarettes, but then we don't ever want to talk about it or address it with alcohol. Yeah, it's like we look at all these small things that we can change, and they might make a 1% to 2% change, but when we look at the effects of alcohol with some of the stuff from Huberman and what you've been learning along the way, it's like, that's low-hanging fruit. Why are we diving into that?
That goes back to more the behavioral aspect of it, and the emotional and thoughts that we have. So that there's the physiological, and then there's also the behavioral. And we really have to take a look at our behavior and what's behind those thoughts in order to break away from alcohol. And you know, because then all this stuff, now I look at this like, wow, you know, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But there was a part of me that even without hearing all this in-depth science, I knew. I would literally look in the mirror and say, you're killing yourself. What are you doing? You are killing yourself. And yet I would keep doing the behavior. And so that goes back to you have to be willing to take a hard look at yourself and ask the whys. You know, why do I drink alcohol? Why do I believe it's helping me? Because the only reason people are drinking alcohol is they perceive a benefit. So this definitely helps to understand there isn't any benefit.
Yeah.
You know, because in the end of the Huberman lab, and he does a really good job saying, hey, I'm not here to cast judgment. I just want to give you all the facts so you can make a scientific, you know, decision. And in the end, he does conclude the best thing you could do is not drink alcohol for your health and your longevity and your brain, your liver, and all of that. So having said all that, you really also need to look at the other piece, which is the emotional and behavioral, you know, aspect of it.
Because that's strong, right?
Very strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in here, you know, we joke about it all the time, you know, do more, think less, right?
Yeah,
because
no emotions.
Yeah, as soon as we get emotional about something or a decision, and we use words like should or like or feel, we usually make decisions that aren't in line with physiology.
Right.
I joke about that all the time, even though I mean it, but that's really hard to do for most people, right? There's a tie to everything. Yeah, for sure. So understanding that piece in conjunction with physiology allows you to be equipped, right? Have more tools in the toolbox to make these decisions.
Yeah.
So before we get off the physiology, you know, I mean, I'm still a nerd here. I want to make sure we share a couple of these big ones. So cancer risk, right? So 4 to 13% increased risk of breast cancer. It's men and women, right? That's with every 10 grams consumed, right? 10 grams of alcohol is equivalent to 1 beer or 1 glass of wine in the US in our serving sizes here, right? That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So you have a tie to that that's just as significant as the tie to lung cancer and cigarettes.
That's right.
Right? And you were the one to tell me, when was this classified as
1989.
There you go. What's changed? Nothing.
Except the alcohol industry worked really hard to suppress that information.
Yeah.
Alcohol is a carcinogen.
Yep.
It is a carcinogen, like cigarettes, like nicotine.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Right? And like, look at the percentage of deaths from cancer in our society. I mean, it is a huge killer, and this is a huge tie that we don't talk about. But we talk about, you know, Bluetooth near my head when I sleep. It's like, okay, we're nitpicking. Like, let's get these big ones addressed, right? So that's huge. That shows that you've got a pretty significant increased risk with minimal consumption, 1 drink. I mean, that's obviously nothing. The big one you mentioned already too is from a metabolic perspective and hormonal perspective, cortisol. Right? We were tying that to stress earlier, so a lot of times we can use alcohol to decrease our immediate reaction to stress or management or fake management, right? But then our cortisol levels are increased, and that's not acutely, that's chronically. So the next day, we still, even when alcohol is not necessarily like in our system, we still have elevated cortisol.
Even days after, depending, you know, on how much you drank. And that was one of the things that really hit me hard, because I was having so much anxiety because of the cortisol. And I had never had anxiety. I had depression in my life, but this anxiety was chronic. And I wasn't, you know, during the days I wasn't drinking, but now I understand that, you know, from this study, that your cortisol is increased even on the days you're not drinking from the drinks that you had.
And as most of us know, when we have hormones that are not in line with where we need to be, they run the show.
Oh yeah.
Right? In our industry, it's usually tied to weight gain, you know, energy, recovery, sleep, that kind of stuff. So if we're sabotaging our hormonal balance, but our main priorities are, I want to decrease my body composition, I want to have more energy, I want to manage stress better, we're doing the complete opposite by utilizing alcohol as a, you know, strategy.
So you're doing all this stuff over here in peak, and we're focusing on all that, even splitting hairs, like you said, like canola oil versus olive oil, because
Yeah.
we don't want to have the inflammatory version of the oil.
Yeah.
We want to have the olive oil, right? We're looking at all that, but then at night we're having our cocktails or our wine, or on the weekends, and really, negating a lot of this hard work over here. So that's that whole detox, retox
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah.
You think and you can go through this cycle in a day, this detox, retox. So one of the interesting things that's come up over the last, 10 years is called the mommy wine culture. So this is, and you see it on all these cocktail napkins and all the stores and the hats that say rosé all day, or, it's mommy wine o'clock, and, the wine witch is here. That's meant to, again, make it kind of funny and humorous and take away the severity of it. But we've got people really now drinking all the time at
100%.
book clubs, at showers, at funerals, at everything. There's always alcohol. But my point about that is that, so if you're having those drinks, you're going through these little mini withdrawals every day,
And you can't break that cycle.
No, not unless you stop for a significant amount of time. And I probably really started to feel better at 4 months of not drinking any alcohol.
And that's that's a significant amount of time. And most people, right, like Sober October, right, or January, it's a New Year's resolution. People do it for 30 days, and these are my words, not theirs. People might do it for totally different reasons, but they feel like they're in control because they've checked the box. Oh, I can kick this for 30 days, so I don't have a problem. I can control this, and then I'm right back in the behavior.
Right. And it's true, you've given your liver and your system a break, but you're going to pick right back up your body as where you left off. So you really haven't done anything.
So that 4 months is right in line with one of the big things that Huberman shared from that research, where, not only is this like an acute and then chronic cortisol or metabolic kind of dysfunction effect, but when we talk about crossing the blood-brain barrier and why it's so toxic long-term for brain health, the neural circuitry actually changes in your brain. Like, that's fascinating to me, where, we're very impulsive when we're under the influence, but that behavior continues after it wears off, right? And it's not even in your system, and it leaves that change in the brain that takes 2 to 6 months to undo. So the 30 days isn't cutting it to undo kind of a toxic behavior for, however many years we've been doing it.
Right.
That was mind-blowing to me too. Like, you're changing the wiring in your brain, maybe not permanently, but a heck of a lot longer than the time that it's just in your system acutely.
And then compound it by how many years you might have been drinking. Most people that I know from my generation started in their teens.
100%.
Or in college. So that's a long time to be doing all of this.
And it wasn't low to moderate for most people in college. Geez. So let's dive into the industry, right? So we know the industry through marketing, through lobbying, through money, really has kind of fooled all of us, right? Or kept us from getting the accurate information. When we hear, smoking cigarettes, everybody kind of cringes, like, oh, why would you do that? For a number of different reasons. We don't think that at all with alcohol because it's not portrayed that way.
But remember, the cigarette industry, before all the awareness, everybody was smoking. It was very common. And because they didn't know. Now look at the warnings, look at all the research, look at the links to cancer. The nicotine industry lost that battle. They tried to hide it for a long time, which is really sad. But that's because there was money involved. The alcohol industry is the same way.
So what would you suggest people do to improve their awareness or get more information when, maybe this is the first time they're hearing that, their behaviors aren't optimal for their physiology and they want to learn more?
Right.
Is it the 30-day experiment? Is that a direction you'd want to
I think that's a great place to start. So the 30-day alcohol experiment, you just Google that and online and you start it yourself and you go through the content. It involves saying, okay, I'm going to do this for 30 days. I'm going to see what happens to my body, because that's the minimum amount of time, like for you to really start feeling some changes. And it is an experiment, so it's not meant to be, willpower and white knuckling it. It's meant to be like, get curious about why you're drinking. Go through the content that she gives you. The book, This Naked Mind, I would also recommend that. There's so much more detail in there. And then what I did was I worked with coaches, alcohol mindset coaches, and I actually became a coach. So
tell us more about that. So now you've kind of lived this for a year.
Yeah.
You went through the process, and it clearly has helped you so much that you really identify with this path to help
Yes.
others. So where can we learn more about what you're doing now? And can you describe, you're not only providing help and assistance for people that are maybe in a really bad place, but you can also assist people that are anywhere in this gray area or spectrum. Can you explain a little
So
more?
I was so amazed at how much coaching helped me, because really I had the answers inside of me. I just needed someone to help me process the questions and get through it. And I just knew I wanted to do that for other people and help other people along their journey. I named my business Sober Fit Chick because I've always been a fit chick, like into fitness, but now I'm a sober fit chick.
Love
and it's so much better. So you can find me at soberfitchick.com.
Awesome.
I have an Instagram, which I'm just starting, Sober Fit Chick LLC.
Cool.
So that's how you can find out about what I do if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or going through the 30-day program with me.
Love it.
Helping you, support you, and guide you.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And this month we're going to have a bunch of statistics, little tidbits, nuggets of information that we're going to share with our clientele to just help, the message that we were trying to deliver today, which was just increase the number of tools in your toolbox to make the decisions that are right for you when you're ready. This isn't about black and white.
No,
it's not about everyone has to live a sober life, right? It's worked for you, and you're in a much better place, but some people aren't ready for that or might not ever want to do that, and that's fine too.
Right.
But understand enough information and what's going on in society so that you can be equipped to make decisions where you're empowered.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what it's all about. I call sobriety my superpower.
Yeah, that's
I definitely feel empowered. So, but yeah, it's about doing what's right for you on your journey.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I greatly appreciate you being transparent, sharing your story, and providing some insight to a lot of people that I think will be thankful that they received this.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for the opportunity and for your
problem.
support.
No problem.